About 4 years ago, I was shopping for a car. I ended up buying a Mitsubishi Lancer, but while I was looking for it, the dealer kept pushing me to buy a much more expensive car. He would quote the car in terms of how much the payments were per month, but I wasn't even looking for financing. I didn't even have the kind of credit to get financing in the first place. But he would show me this car, and I knew it was much more than I was prepared to spend. And I would ask him how much, and he said, "Oh, it's only $500 a month, or we could cut it to $300 a month." And that's the jargon he was using. And then he asked me what my budget was, and see, I'm more interested in seeing whether the car suits my needs. And among the cars that do, which one has the most value out of it, right? Nowhere in that equation does my budget or how much I make come into play. And the unfortunate thing is I don't speak car buzzwords. I think that's why he was using the numbers game on me. And so I pretended to answer my phone, and I sounded very elaborate on the phone. I was pretending to talk to various family members, pretending to talk to my boss, and using very difficult language for him to understand, talking about what I'm doing in machine learning and artificial intelligence to kind of confuse him. And then I walked away. And sure enough, not long after I left, because quote-unquote my wife needed to see me, he called me back with the deal with the Mitsubishi Lancer, so that's good. So I learned that sometimes just a difficult buzzword, to make yourself sound intelligent can do wonders, even if it has nothing to do with the deal at hand. Back in early March of 2020, when we first learned the potential of having a large-scale quarantine, and I had already lost my job, and I knew there was potential that I would be working remotely going forward anyhow, I was shopping for a place to quarantine. Seattle was pretty expensive, and I talked about in other videos a big problem I run into here in the United States if I were to go to the hospital. I wanted to avoid that. So I called several hotels that I had stayed in previously in other cities or in Taiwan, and also the hostel that I stayed in Warsaw. I think I made a couple videos when I was there 4 years ago. When I called the hostel in Warsaw asking what would be the best rate they could do on a long-term stay, I was planning to stay a month or two. You got to remember, at the beginning, nobody anticipated it was going to be a 5 or 6 month quarantine. And the guy answering the phone said that he would talk to his manager, and I asked him, well, what's a good ballpark number, just so I know what we're dealing with. And in very broken English, he said that it would depend on, well, how long I was staying, how busy it was, blah, 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 and what my budget was. And I'm thinking to myself, how does my budget come into play, right? You have a room that you know how busy it gets, you know how much you want to rent it out for. And so he really pushed hard. He and his manager really pushed hard for my budget. And I explained my situation. I'm a professor, and I'm temporarily out of work, and I'll probably be working remotely because we have a illness here in the States. At the time, COVID-19 had not washed up in Poland yet. It was more of a Seattle problem at the time, right? We had 4 or 5 cases here in Seattle. And the nice thing was that when I finally gave in and gave my budget, I gave the number in Polish zloty. The manager, she was expecting me to say how much US dollars, and I sounded much more sophisticated than she had anticipated, and it threw her off track. So I would have negotiated a good deal, except that then we closed the borders, and I decided to stay in the US anyhow because there were opportunities I wanted to shoot for, and I thought to myself, hey, if I end up going to the hospital here in the US, I can get my voice heard. I talked about my reasoning behind that in a previous video. But I learned from these 2 experiences that even just sounding intelligent with creative wording can really throw your opponent for a loop when it comes to negotiating. Sometimes it pays to throw 1 or 2 things that not necessarily as a show-off, but just to up your intelligence, or at least the perception of your intelligence, if you will. Thanks for watching.